Hi folks, welcome to another episode of The Broken Meeple. This is a show where I review board and card games, give top 10s, and just generally rant and rave like the old man laying at a cloud. Before I get on with this review though, I'd like to just say a quick word from my sponsor, who I've not mentioned in quite a while. As a fellow gamer, you'll understand this is unacceptable. The solution? Head down to my new sponsor, KIENDA.co.uk. KIENDA stocks many of the hot new releases as well as some old hidden gems. Free delivery on orders over £30, further discounts on bulk purchases, and even 5% of your spending refunded back to you as points to be used for further discounts down the line. If you use the referral link in the description below and sign up for a new account, you'll get 5% discount on your first order over £60. So let's make gaps in your collection a thing of the past. Get down to KIENDA and start saving today. Thank you for listening and enjoy the rest of the video.
Get on with it.
So this is the first of 3 videos where I'm going to talk about Ivy Studio games, Fractured Sky, Moonrakers, and then the expansions to Moonrakers. 3 videos in total. Thank you very much for sending me these review copies. I knew nothing about this one going in it though. Moonrakers, I actually knew what it was about and I was intrigued to try it. This one, it just showed up. It's got a very pretty cover. Other than that, I know nothing about this game before jumping into it. It was just like, okay, this looks cool. Pieces look cool, it looks colourful, but we'll see what it is. So I literally went into this completely blind. Other than the fact that it looked pretty, it was a big box, this is the deluxe version of the game, and the fact that the front cover said 40 to 90 minutes with 1 to 5 players. I'm always a bit wary when something has 5 players written on the box, but then 40 to 90 minutes intrigued me because it's like, okay, this will be a relatively quick game then, not a 3-hour monster with a ton of rules or anything. But it was a big box, so it's like, okay, is it all just components or is there a lot of fiddly bits included? Well, I had to find out for myself.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for them.
So Fractured Sky is kind of a smorgasbord of mechanics. It's a little bit of push your luck, a little bit of area control, a little bit of bluffing and subterfuge, a little bit of base building. You know, there's kind of a little bit for everybody in this game. But the idea is that on this map, there's different areas, different islands, and these starfalls have fallen down. Whatever, the theme makes no difference here. But what these essentially are is victory points that you're aiming to grab at the end of every round. There are 5 rounds in total, and it escalates as to how much is going on, but otherwise they kind of play out pretty much the same. And so what you have is you have your own player board in front of you that will have various pieces of your color. So you have little things that you can build like fortresses and markets, you know, in order to boost up your power in various places or to get more resources that you need in order to build stuff. You have your little mini ships, just trying an example of one here for this particular color. So these tiny little skimmer ships you can place on the board as temporary power. But the primary thing that you are doing is that you will have a screen on your board. I'm just going to use this one for examples here. So let's say I've got this board here. The screen will effectively sit like this. It's not too difficult to put them on, don't worry, it's not too fiddly. But this will cover, more importantly, these little trays here, where you will have these tokens. And you're probably thinking, well, hang on a minute, how on earth are these staying in your hand like that when there's as many tokens? Because they're magnetized. Yep, these are magnet tokens, and they're numbered between 0 and 10 with a couple of zeros and very different looking 1 and 10 chips. But the idea is that these will be hidden behind your screen, so people won't be able to see what order you've placed them in. And for the most part, when you want to place one of your big airships out on an island to say, this is one I'm going to fight over, you use the ship and you grab it with a little magnet, which is so ultra cool, it's unreal, and you place it down on one of the islands. That's the one of the islands of 3 that you are going to fight over in the round, and there's, for the most part, in a big game, 10 islands to fight over. The problem is, you don't necessarily know where you're going at first, because the starfalls have fallen in random locations, and you only know so much at the start. There is always one public location that everybody knows. So in here, the Frosty Fjord. We know there's a starfall there, we're going to possibly go and fight for it there. But then the rest on this little board here are hidden face down. You have 1 in the first round, 2 in the second, 3 in the third, and so forth. But these basically are ones where players have to find out specific information. So one of your actions in the round, as well as building little base bits and putting your ship out, can be to peek at these cards. You spend resources, you have a look at the card, you can decide if you want to take a resource, but doing so gives away information because different locations give certain resources, but you have some information that no one else has. You mark it down, and so I know, for example, that a starfall will be in the Molten Moor, and hopefully you don't. Unless you decide to peek at the same card, but there's other cards for you to peek at. When you go to different locations for the first time, you'll draw from the rest of these hidden ones. So you know, for example, one is not going to appear at the Sinister Spires, so that's not in the running. But on top of that, you also have objectives each round. So you have an objective that will score each round. These are hidden as well at the start of the game, so you won't know what they are to begin with. And you can pay resources to peek at these, knowing other ways to get more Starfalls down the line. That's essentially kind of the gist of the actions that you can do, but what ends up happening is at the end of a round, every player will fight over the islands that they're on. So let's say at the quote-unquote peaceful plains here, we've got 2 here, and I'm just going to use my tokens for, you know, in all intensive purposes here. Let's say that they're there. So at the end of the round, they fight and the ships are removed, and I can see that purple used an 8 and red only used a 1. So the higher troop power will take the Starfall, and then 2nd, 3rd and 4th place, if there's multiple players in the battle, will be able to take a certain amount of resources from the island in question. And every single island will resolve in this manner, regardless of how many ships that are there. And then the board is cleaned off, except for the various base bits that players have built. These will remain permanent. And then you put out new set of hidden Starfall cards. You know, keep the objectives as they are. They're there for the whole game. Get your ships back. Get some resources from, you know, what you won at the end of the last round, and go again. But the idea of this is that you don't necessarily know what other players are doing with their troop tokens, so you kind of have to think about what they're doing, where they're going, where they're likely to go, which tokens they've used, because you have the added issue that if you place out more than 10 value of your chips in a round, you end up actually nerfing the value of your troop power and making it much harder for you to win combats. In fact, frankly, trying to go in with more than 10 practically nerfs your entire round, so you don't really want to do it.
Do it! Do it, do it, do it!
Each round pretty much plays out the same, except you have more hidden Starfall locations to work with, and obviously more permanent base fixtures are on the map, giving you more resources or adding power to different locations. And at the end of 5 rounds, you simply see who's got the most of these Starfalls, and whoever has the most, have a guess.
Of course!
So let's talk about components first. Yes, this is a deluxe copy, so therefore you are paying a higher price for the game itself. It's not going to be cheap. But wow, okay, these are good components. These are really, really good. I mean, these magnet chips are stellar. They're not just a gimmick. These work so well because they're behind your screen, and obviously you don't want to have to lift up the screen, you don't want to accidentally knock things over, but without fail, these will automatically magnetize to the thing without any problems. I've never had these fall off. They are sturdy and they're set in a way that they will cover up the whole number. You will not be able to know which number it is, except in the case of the 10 and 1s, where they are specifically colored differently because they act as a kind of bluffing tool. A bit more on that later. But these magnet tokens are brilliant, and I love just sort of tricking people when I get this game out and I say, oh, by the way, yeah, here's your currency, and then throw this at them, expecting it to, like, they're expecting it to splay everywhere. It's a nice little trick I like to play. Yeah, I know, I'm mean, whatever. But everything else in here, I mean, even the cubes are chunky and glossy. And I mean, yeah, cubes, but, you know, they're still decent quality cubes here. They're plasticky. But these little miniatures that you get for the various base buildings, I mean, they are, you know, they're painted in the players' different colors and they look cool, and the little bases here. The, you know, the ships though, oh man, these ships are cool. I mean, each player has their own different sculpt of ship. They look amazing. They are painted as well. You know, everything just looks absolutely fantastic. Even the card artwork is pretty cool, although I'm in two minds about some of the weird fancy tiles they put in here. You can play a normal card version where it's just the pictures and they look cool, or you can play these thick tiles where they've got that, I forget what it is, it's that reflective little trick where if you like turn the card from side to side, the picture moves. Not quite augmented reality, but it was like the bit that came before it. I forget what they call it, but you know, in the wrong lighting, these can be a little bit of a pain to see, so kind of just, you kind of have to just play it by ear and see what your lighting setup is, but at least you've got the option of just going with the cards, which I'm sure the retail version will have alone, or going with these funky tiles. I quite like using these tiles there. They feel good in the hands, you know, they won't break as easily, and I've been quite lucky with the lighting setups where they're not going to reflect and blind me if I'm not careful. The screens can be a little bit on the fiddly side at first, but you get used to it quite quick. Essentially, you just want to get the little two ends, tuck them underneath your tray, and everything kind of just sits in place naturally. But at first, if you're not told how they work, you might be going, well, how on earth do these fit on then? It's like, just follow the directions in the rulebook, you'll be fine. But yeah, the only component I'm probably a little bit annoyed with is perhaps this tray here, because this tray holds the like hidden cards, and for some reason you get a tray with one of these overlays on it, but it's just the overlay doesn't change from game to game. So why not just use a printed tray, or why not just use a piece of cardboard, like a board or something to do it? It's kind of weird because this thing sits on there and it covers the middle so that you can put your cubes in certain spots, but it's also not particularly well fixed. I mean, all I have to do is nudge the thing and it will slip off and be a little bit like precarious in different setups. And the tray is bendy, which means this thing doesn't like snap on or anything. That's kind of a bit of a misstep, and it gets a little bit annoying, but not game-breaking annoying. It's just, I feel like they could have done that in a slightly different way.
I feel like I'm gonna break this damn thing.
This is one of the most streamlined big box games that I've had a chance to play in recent months. I mean, it really is dirt simple. The rulebook may seem big and imposing, but it's big font, loads of pictorial representation here and examples, and a lot of this is just set up and the rules for 1 to 2 players. We'll get onto that a little bit later, but in terms of the normal 3 to 5 player game, there's not a lot of rules. It's written well, nothing's ambiguous, and there's plenty of pictures to explain it. But honestly, once you've read the rules, you're kind of done, because you have a couple of good reference cards to, remind you of the key things, like what each building does and how the battles work and, what you can do with resources. So once you've got these 2 cards and you've skimmed the rulebook once, you're pretty much done. And then everything just goes really smoothly. There's only a little nitpicky area where the rules get a tiny bit fiddly. The way that skimmers, these tiny ships, interact with markets, and the fact that your 0 troop power token does nothing unless you can boost it by other means. There's just 1 or 2 little edge rules like that are a little fiddly, but only for your first game, because once you've played this a second time, you'll remember it, and it's pretty easy whatever from that point on. Everything else though, I mean, your actions on your turn, how the battles resolve, how these cards work, everything is super streamlined, and oh my god, it's so refreshing to see somebody actually understand what that word means. The fact that they actually thought, you know what, people need to be able to play this game easily. They need to be able to get it out, learn the rules quick, and then during the game, I don't want to be dealing with clunky fiddly rules, or constantly having to look at the rulebook and check whether this works, or does it work like that? I don't quite understand what this bit means and that. No, none of this. The rulebook's lovely and all, but you're not going to need it once you've read it once.
Super easy, barely an inconvenience.
Fractured Sky's biggest unique selling point is how well it plays based on the players at the table. This has a certain amount of fragility to it, but not as much as, say, like a full-blown negotiation game. This one isn't a negotiation game, but the players at the table make this game. You can play this with 1 to 5 players, but we'll get on to 1 and 2 later. Main way you play it is 3 to 5, and I cannot believe I am saying this, but this is actually one of those occasions, and I said it for the last review I did, but I think this game works best at the higher player counts.
What?
5 does take a little bit longer to finish, but 5 means that you've got a lot going on this board and there's only so much room for you all, so you're getting into a lot of fights. But if you want to make it a little bit open and a little bit more quicker, then 4 players is still good, but you're not talking a long game here. I mean, this is 40 to 90 minutes. You are more accurately looking at a 90-minute game here. 40 minutes is a solo play, and maybe 2 players to 45 minutes, 50 minutes. But really, minimum an hour to play this game, even with 3 players, but somewhere between 60 and 90, and it should only exceed 90 if you're teaching the game, playing it for the first time, or if you've just got quite slow players. And no way, shape, or form should this get anywhere near 2 hours, unless somebody is playing really slow, which can happen, more on that a bit later, but, for the most part, this is a relatively snappy, fairly quick game. I can't, really? Yes, we can have quick, snappy, streamlined games here, people.
How hard can it be?
But where the multiplayer aspect comes in is with the use of these little tokens, because it's hidden information. to an extent, because different people will look at different hidden starfall locations, but one of them is public information, so everybody knows that one. The objectives, again, are hidden information. Some players will know what they are, some won't, and you will track them with the cubes of the color. So I know that so-and-so looked at this particular starfall location and took a gold, which means it can only be 1 out of 5 locations on the board. Well, you know, the public one, you know, could be overlap with it, which is a cool thing, but then I already looked at one of these in the deck, and that's one of the ones with gold on it. So it can't be that location. So there's only 4 possible choices. Well, hang on, where's your ship? Have you flown there? Yes, you have, actually. You know there's a starfall there, don't you? But they could be bluffing. You've looked at a location and then they've gone to a specific place here, the Peaceful Plains. That might be a complete bluff. They might literally be just there to get resources or to make you lure your ships, your big ships there to have a big fight. And there's a lot of that in this game. You know, you have these tokens that, for all intents purposes, you don't want to add up to more than 10. So you might stick your 10 token out. Well, actually, we'll get onto that in a minute. You might stick your 9 out, for example, but then that only leaves you with 0s and 1 that you can play to equal up to 10. But the other players don't know where you put your 9. You might have put it right on top of their heads. You might have left it somewhere out, you know, for them to be surprised by later. Again, you can play a lot of these little clever ploys. But another aspect, as I mentioned a couple of times, is the 10 and the 1 token. I'm trying to find the 1 token. Here we go. So those two are white bordered. So you can't see if it's 10 or 1, but if somebody uses that ship, you can tell it's their 10 or 1 chip. This adds another element of cool bluffing, because you place this one down and suddenly people have got to think, well, hang on, have you just gone there with your biggest armada? Or are you literally only going there with a 1 and you're trying to bluff me out of this one? And whether you play it as your first ship, second ship, third ship, makes a big difference. But it's not just 3 turns and then you're done. Once you play your third ship, you're out of the round. But the other actions, peeking at cards, playing little markets and fortresses and stuff, they take actions as well. So the rate at which the ships come out from players is going to be different. Somebody might have a lot of resources and does a lot of building before they put their things out, so they're reacting to what other players are doing. But of course, that means that other players will maybe set themselves up really nice in locations, making that person think, oh, maybe I can't really win that battle then, I'm not sure. But, you know, there is a nice dynamic element there where some people are deliberately trying to hold off playing their big ships because they want to see how the board state goes. You're always interested in what another player does. At no point are you, like, not interested in what a player does. You always want to know what they're doing. Now, granted, you know, we'll get on to one of the flaws with that a bit later, but you know, person sitting next to me there, I'm thinking, well, hang on a minute, I know what that objective is. That wants me to have the most power in the Molten Moor. You're thinking about going to the Molten Moor. Oh, you have, haven't you? Ah, what did you go there with? A low or a high? I need to know.
And there just ain't room enough on this planet for the 2 of us.
And it creates a nice bit of banter with other players because you're sort of psyching each other out. You can tell the truth, lie to your heart's content. You know, somebody goes to a spot you wanted to go. It's like, now you've made me think. What are you doing? What are you playing at? And then as they perform the rest of their turns in the round, you start making little deductions, thinking, well, hang on a minute, you went there first quite quick. And it's like, was that just random? No, hang on a minute, you haven't put your 2 zeros out. One of those is gotta be pretty high. You know, you're putting a lot of thing there. But then I might have decided, you know what, my first 2 ships are just, you know, for, you know, example purposes, my first 2 are zeros. I've put 2 ships out in key locations with zeros, just to make people think, I'm not sure I can win that battle. You know what, I might stay away, and I might be banking on that, but of course I'm keeping that to myself, you know, and coming up with my own little tactical ploys. You know, you're playing the opponents as much as you are playing the locations that are hidden and public, and the public objectives. As much as I said this can have fairly snappy turns and be only about 90 minutes, there is the occasional analysis paralysis that can come up because it's a very tactical game. You can only really strategize for the objectives, because if you look at it, you know it's coming up and it will never move. But everything else is very tactical, which is a plus of the game. I do like the fact that it's tactical, but then you have to realize that your turn might suddenly, you know, your plans might suddenly be scuppered, and you have to rethink what you're doing. And of course, when you've got 4, particularly 5 of you doing that, you are going to have to put up with a little bit of a wait between turns because nothing is really simultaneous. That being said, you are still interested in what they do on their turns for the most part, because you want to know if certain players will put things down or go look at a card, or, you know, particularly put their ship in a location. You're like, oh, you've gone there now. There's a good chance you're going to go high there, which means maybe I should pull away and go somewhere else. You know, you want to know what they do, so you are engaged up to a point. But yeah, 5 players can run a little bit long past the 90-minute mark if you're not careful, so just be aware. There is a certain random push-your-luck element to this, and that's probably my bigger negative of the game, but it's not a massive negative. The issue is that because this is hidden information, you know, you may choose to look at it and you may not. But that also means you might luck out at something that nobody looked at, and you did it entirely by fluke. I had a time where I didn't look. Nobody looked at one particular starfall. And there was one objective where I had to go to a specific location with a lot of troop power. So I did. Nobody knew a starfall was going to be there, so nobody really challenged me for it. But then suddenly, it turned out to have a starfall there. So I get one for the objective and one for the card that no one looked at. But I didn't know it was there. It was entirely fluke. And there are these occasions where somebody can just get quite lucky with one of these card setups. It's something you kind of have to deal with. There's not really any way you can get around it, but it's not crazy. I mean, it doesn't tend to cause massive bouts of swinginess, and the game isn't that long, so if it does cause a little bit of that, it's not that big a deal. But yeah, you just have to accept that the price you pay for hidden information is that sometimes whatever that information was might just benefit somebody by good timing. At least it's not random in terms of the tokens that you use with the player ships. That is decided by the players, and obviously you are aware of what they could and could not be playing because everybody's got the same chips at every time. So, you know, you have that to go by. But yeah, just be a little bit cautious of the hidden information arc.
I'm lucky.
That's not a superpower.
Player scaling is a slight issue as well, because this one says 1 to 5 players. Now with 3 players, it's fine. It's very quick, very snappy. You could get this done in about an hour and 15 minutes. And you do have another side of the board with less locations on it, so it is balanced enough for 3. But you're only in each other's heads so often. 4 player is almost a bit like how Ticket to Ride works. You know, it becomes a bit more open because you get more locations, but even though you have another player, you will get quite a few locations that will typically have only 1 person in there. With 5 players, it gets a lot more vicious and there's a lot less space to go around. And so this game works probably best at 5, pretty good with 4, decent enough with 3. 1 and 2 is where we get the problem, because 1 and 2 are fine. They work. But honestly, if you're buying this game with the intention to play this mostly 1 or 2 players, you're going to be disappointed. At least the vast majority of you will be.
I beg to differ, sir.
In the 2-player and 1-player game, you effectively have a solo deck of cards. You have an AI. You fight against 2 of them in a solo game, 1 of them in a 2-player, and you don't even use the objectives in a solo game, so this cool aspect is taken out of the game entirely when you're playing by yourself. But all you're basically doing is the same stuff yourself, like I'll put things out and I'll put me tokens out, my ships, whichever I go. But all the AI effectively does is they flip a card, they follow the action based on, you know, what's the most advantageous for them, and then they have these tokens which basically have multiple different power values on them, and depending on the difficulty you're playing, when you reveal them, they will rotate to the higher or lower side. And you know 3 of them aren't in the round because they're revealed before you start a particular round. But that's kind of it. And it's mostly just a kind of push your luck optimization puzzle, which is not really the feel I want from this game, because what you have lost by playing this with 1 or 2 players is the bit that I like most about the game, which is the groupthink, the multiplayer aspect. The fact that you're like making bluffs and ploys and thinking, well, what are you going to do? What are you likely to do? And everyone getting in each other's faces. When there's only you and a couple of AIs on the game, it's not that interesting. And you're taking away the cool stuff about, you know, having more objectives for solo play, but also just the idea that I'm engaged with other players and thinking, oh, are you going to do this? Or if you played your 10-1, or I'm not sure, you lose pretty much all of that in the solo mode. But it's not that the solo mode is bad. It just works, and that's about it, really. It's functional, it's not that difficult to learn, but it's just there. It feels like you're just playing a lesser game every time you play it. And after I played the solo a few times, I was like, okay, that seemed okay, fine. Alright, now I've got to play it multiplayer. And as soon as I played it multiplayer, I have no intention to play this game solo ever again. It's just pointless now. I've got plenty of other games that are far more exciting to me as a solo game. With this, you want to play with players. This game should have just said 3 to 5. Not every game needs to cater for every single player count. Not every game needs a solo mode, and this one frankly did not need one. So Fractured Sky has a few little flaws in places, most of it to do with the whole 1 and 2 player mode. The rest of them are fair nitpicks though for the most part, you know, little odds and ends that come up every now and again. But the game itself is generally pretty good. It's very good looking, granted it is a deluxe version, but I would imagine the retail version is still going to look pretty decent. I mean, you've still got these chips with the big airships because you're going to need that. That's the forefront of the mechanic. You might not just have these funky little reflective light cards. Oh, woe is me, I guess. You know, I don't think it's going to be that big a deal. But everything else is, you know, made with good production quality. I love the colored miniatures. Nothing's looking grey and horrible on the table. And the artwork, you know, I've heard some people, I heard that like the Dice Tower went a bit mad on the artwork. And I'm like, why? I mean, that's a very nice looking cover and the board is gorgeous. I like the artwork in this game. It's colourful. It's a beautiful game that turns people's heads. What more do you want? But it's also super smooth. It's so refreshing to play a game in a box this big that's still streamlined. It's such a rarity these days. And so once you've taught the rules, you're done. You just go through the 5 rounds and you have a good time. And you will, particularly with more players, which again, this will fill a bit of a niche by being a game with 5 players that I want to bring out with 5 players. That works with 5 players. All those like little bluffing ploys you can do, the subterfuge, the hidden information, it makes you engaged with the game, but also means you are engaged with the other players. It's so good that this is not a multiplayer solitaire game, which I was worried it was going to be, and it really isn't. This is one where you want the other players there and you're gonna enjoy it. You know, as much as people like to say, well, I like playing with other people even if it's a multiplayer solitaire game. Yes, but you are doing that, not the game. This game is doing it, and that is what I'm talking about. It certainly may not be the most varied game out there, and you do have to put up with that swing of luck, which has and now and again come on reared its ugly head, but it's still a pretty solid game all round. I'm giving it a strong 8 out of 10. It's not quite enough to hit the 9 out of 10 category for me, but I still think this is a great game and definitely one to have a look at, particularly if you are dying to find something that will work particularly well with 4 and 5 and you don't mind that little bit of the luck aspect rearing its head every now and again. But if you can afford the deluxe set and you want those fancy components, well, it's certainly going to look fantastic when you do. These magnets are going to be in both sets of the game, and I just think this works so well. They did a great job at making sure this wasn't a gimmick. It's just a bit of a shame that when they say 1 to 5 players on the backs, you're really talking 4 to 5, probably 3. 3 is still fine, but you're really mainly talking 4 to 5. The 1 and 2 just feels like an unnecessary addition. It's fine, it just doesn't really elevate anything. Like, there is nothing that the solo and 2 player does that is not done better in the multiplayer. So if you're buying this hoping to play this mostly solo and 2 player, you're gonna be disappointed, and I don't advise you do it. But it's a strong 8 out of 10. I enjoy it. I'm going to hang on to this one because I don't have a lot of games that cater well for 5 players, and this one's going to fill that niche quite well. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, then please thumb it up on YouTube and thumb it up on Board Game Geek when it goes live on the page. Don't forget to check out the other content I've done lately, like the recent hard to find Nikosu dice, and I also reviewed Mythic Mischief, which is another game from Ivy Studios quite a while ago. It's a bit of an oldie, but have a search on my page. You should be able to find it fairly easily. And of course, leave your comments down below. Do you like this game? Is it one you're looking forward to? Do you actually really enjoy the solo mode? Is it something that you really like? But I can't imagine you would like the solo mode more than the multiplayer. That I just find to be madness. But maybe you're a mad person. You want to make your voice heard. By all means, let it be heard. Tell me I'm wrong. That's always a fun one to read. Until next time, remember, regardless if you are going to be obsessed with magnetic chips for the rest of the evening, it's still only a game. So bye for now.